Hello, everyone. Welcome to the happiest pod on earth. I'm Steph. I'm an educator who uses passions and fandoms to help my students grow and learn about themselves and the world around them.
And I'm Ariel, a licensed therapist who uses clients' passions and fandoms to help them grow and heal from trauma and mental and wellness.
Hi everyone, I'm Jodie Anders. I am a Jewish bisexual creator and I focus on creating diversity and promoting youth empowerment. I currently serve as the Publicity and Communications Director for a youth nonprofit in California, and I've spent over 2 decades mentoring teens in confidence and leadership skills. I'm the co-author of Queer Cheer, Activities, Advice, and Affirmations for LGBTQ plus teens. And I also produce a podcast, Let's Talk About Leadership, Service, and Sisterhood, which is a podcast for teens by teens.
Hi, my name is Shalom. As a student, I've been involved in many campaigns and community organizations working with youth organizers in the San Fernando Valley to fight for the rights of Filipino migrant workers, justice and visibility for displaced ethnic communities abroad, and have worked to create, support, and educate members of the queer students of color community through the creation of my ever-growing coalition, California State University Northridge's Queer Students of Color Club. I'm also a queer indie musician, producing music under the name Boy Venus. Check me out on SoundCloud if you're interested. Specifically working within the electronic genre to make music reminiscent of games like Pokemon, Legends of Zelda, Undertale, while also using techniques from artists like Rebecca Sugar, Ivy Tran, and Stephen Valima.
Beautiful. And here at Happiest Pod, we dissect Disney mediums with a critical lens. Why? Because we are more than just fans, and we expect more from the mediums we consume. So what are we talking about today?
As you both heard these wonderful introductions from our exceptional guests today, we have Jodie and Shalom. Welcome to the happiest pod on earth. We are so thrilled that you are here to talk about all things LGBTQ representation in honor of Pride Month. And we're really excited to really dive in and see the world and see the Disney world from your all's lens. So yeah, welcome to the podcast.
Excited to be here.
I'm curious, we have heard about representation in general in the media. And when it comes to Disney, do you feel or believe that they're increasing LGBTQ plus representation? And if so, when do you think they've done it? And are there opportunities they missed, or were they just completely missed the mark?
I feel like it's kind of like an ebb and flow situation. I mean, it's definitely had some more, representation. And actually, this question can get so nuanced, right? Because are we talking about like original animation? Are we talking about like the entire Disney universe, within Marvel and Star Wars? So
at this point, apparently Hulu's in there too. So if there's some horror movies or other animation you want to include, it counts.
Yeah, I think like in the more like traditional sense of Disney, Pixar, it's slowly increasing, like strictly within like movies and TV. Like in movies, I feel like we're still not, other than maybe like Strange World, getting those main characters that would be great. But it's really nice to see at least, some nuances through the community, like having a non-binary character in Elementals, or just, at least some representation, which is better than that. But there's also just questionable things that they've done in sense of like pulling from different markets, or like I know so like when they did Lightyear, I loved that they had Alicia, like that his sidekick was such a big representation, and then it was so incredibly heartbreaking to have this reaction to what was not even a minute of the relationship, the lesbian relationship she had, which was this beautiful little heartwarming family, and seeing at the time like them like pulling it from markets and things like that. But at the same time, like if we kind of pull back the lens a little bit, at the same time, there's like getting the monthly emails, not even just the LGBTQ pieces they will highlight in a monthly email, but like other minority communities and even like abilities that I think they're doing better on, although sometimes embarrassing when they maybe only have one or two. And I mean, I went to Pride Night at Disneyland last night, which, you know, they now officially have their official one. And how many years did we have our unofficial? You know, we still do have gay days at Disneyland, but like it's nice that they're officially hosting that. So getting better, but riding a wave and still caring a little too much maybe about what some people think.
Shalom, any thoughts on your end?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think when thinking about representation at Disney, it's when you look at it as like a conglomerate, I do think that they've missed the mark in a lot of ways. But I do think if you look at individual stories and individual narratives, then, you know, there's some great representation at Disney for queer people. Like just recently, in fact, they did a remake of the Goosebump books, and Miles McKenna, who's a activist, actor, and musician, is one of the leads in the show. And so, like, individual properties, you know, they do have great representation. And even ones that, like, aren't necessarily inherently queer, like Frozen, you know what I mean? Or, like, not, well, Turning Red too, but then also Luca, you know? Those movies that weren't intended to be queer, but they're autobiographical stories that, you know, queer people can relate to, you know? Like, having those is great, and that, it makes you feel more seen. But I think as a conglomeration, I think they're missing the mark.
And I love how you said that there are stories that have been out there that queer people can relate to. So thinking back when you were younger, did you have any specific Disney characters that you were drawn to? Or like you just felt a special connection to?
Yeah, I told Jodie and Eric actually that the way that I found out that I was queer is through watching The Little Mermaid, because I had a crush on both Eric and Ariel.
Yes.
And that was really my first like understanding of queerness, you know, even before I could put words to it. Disney kind of opened up my mind for queerness, and I think a large part of that was like I grew up for a while in a very like predominantly woman like community. I don't know how to say that, but I grew up with a lot of women basically. My best friend for like a long time was my cousin, and like she taught me how to braid. She taught me how to like dress dolls and things. Like I learned how to paint nails, and we would watch like Disney princess movies and play the little like there used to be a Switch game where you just got like a toggle and you just would like, I don't know, not Switch, Wii, like a Nintendo Wii Disney Princess game, where you just like would toggle and like do little mini games for each Disney princess, and that was like my favorite game. And so like yeah, I think Disney in a lot of ways as like a child was my first avenue of queerness even before I knew what it meant. So yeah.
How about you, Jodie?
Oh my gosh. You know, I think that I missed, like, to be 1000% honest, like, until I got older, like, I missed a lot of, like, the queer coding that happened in Disney. And it's incredible, like, even, you know, when I was at Pride Night last night, like, seeing quotes and seeing things that are pulled out of, like, movies that I watched as a teenager that I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how did I miss that? You know? Like even like we were just talking about Little Mermaid, you know, and like the entire like part of their world song, you know, and how so many people have taken that on as like an anthem of otherness in a way, you know, like and now like kind of thinking back to, you know, how much like I was obsessed at the time of like Beauty and the Beast, and just kind of thinking that I felt that like I saw it, like I saw characters that were othered and that were like outcast and that I was drawn to them without like really understanding what was happening to me.
Yeah, something so beautiful, especially about The Little Mermaid too, that you reminded me of, Jodie, is like, I think the guy who wrote it was queer, and like his writing of the Little Mermaid story was about like his experience with unrequited love as a queer person, which is why when the prince rejects her, she like turns into sea foam at the end.
In the original Hans Christian Andersen?
Like, yeah. So I don't know. It's like there's beauty even in that, just like exposing people to queer stories, even if they aren't like queer when you're exposed to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And for our listeners, our episode 24, Disney Villains, where we had Chance on, he explained what queer coding is, which is an attribution of queer traits to a fictional character, sometimes stereotypical, sometimes hidden, where they create a expression of gender identity or sexual orientation that could be projected onto them for people who have a queer experience. And the reason we talked about that in the villains episode is because a lot of villains are queer coded.
And speaking of villains, the inspiration for Ursula herself was a drag queen named Divine. So it was right there in front of our faces for a very long time. And that it posed as inspiration. And she's such an iconic villain that, you know, Ursula in herself, the way Disney portrayed her, was very tied to queerness.
It was so funny. Actually, when I was talking with a friend of mine about which characters are queer coded in Disney, there was like kind of a piece of me that was like, why are they villains? And I was like rejecting some of them. And like one of them came up, Jafar, right? And I was like, Jafar, what? Why are there so many villains? And we were like looking into it, and actually the creator, who is gay, said, yes, I created him after the game. And I'm like, I'm wrong, you know, like.
Yeah, it's especially interesting to think about things like that, like with the impacts of the Hays Code in you know, film and television, you know, like having to queer code characters so that people could have representation and see themselves. And like the idea of diva worshipping and things like that come from the Hays Code and like not having proper representation. So you cling to like female characters who go through similar things as you. And like, I don't know, it's like even when they try to stop us, we'll find a way. And I just love that. You know what I mean?
Are you able to explain to our audience what the Hays Code is?
Yes. So the Hays Code was a list of rules and guidelines for television and film that were created and enforced from I think the 1930s to the 1960s.
1934 to 1968.
Yes. Yay. Yeah, and so it prohibited things like conversations about menstruation, I'm pretty sure, as well as birth, like just birth, anything that was considered like sexually promiscuous, or like perverted, which includes queer people. I think conversations about like wrongdoings of the military as well were in there.
Yes.
So yeah.
A lot of censoring.
A lot of things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And we know it ended in the 60s because of the civil rights movement and the push towards appropriate representation and questioning some of the things that we were seeing on screen, specifically the rule that was respect for the law, and that law could not be ridiculed, and there should be sympathy towards those who might violate it if they are within uniform.
Yeah, that progression for sure.
Jodie, could you tell us about Pride Night?
Is there one thing you really loved and one thing that you would change?
So Pride Night, they had their first night last night, and guys, okay, I just remembered like this thing that happened last night. So we there's like a lot of really cute things. Like there's an overabundance of rainbow food, which is like overwhelming. And there's like lots of really cute like backdrops that you can take your picture with, and quotes that they've taken from like different movies they perceive to, be inspirational and related to Pride. But I love, my favorite things are one, that they take the characters and they dress them in cool like Pride rainbow clothes. So like Mickey had like sorry, no, it was Donald. I don't know why I said Mickey. Donald's like my favorite. Donald had this like beanie hat thing on with a cute little rainbow.
Is it like a beret?
Not glitter. What do you call it? Rhinestone? No, they were like, it was like a beanie hat with like a rhinestone heart in rainbow on his hat, and he was like pointing it out to me. It was the cutest thing. And then like Clarabelle had this like rainbow pleated dress on. Oh my gosh, there's so many highlights, guys. And then Maleficent and Cruella literally did like a runway.
They did like
they were voguing?
Oh,
yes.
They were voguing.
They were literally.
What? I would have loved to see that. Wow.
I was so
I hope there's a recording.
mad that there's gotta be. I know that like people were, because we got there like just in time to see it, and I was dying. I was dying because we were just talking about how they're also queer coded, and they were amazing. They were amazing. But okay, literally the best thing, honestly, to me is guys, like anywhere I go, like sometimes there's a question of like, am I going into the space where it's safe? Like, is it okay for me to wear something Pride related or, whatnot? And it was just so beautiful. Like, I was telling my friend last night, when I'm in a space and I see something like rainbow or I see something Pride, my eye like zooms to it, like, oh, that's somebody from my community, or that's whatever. And everybody last night, like every single person is wearing, so I'm just like, oh my gosh, they've got this and they're like this, and this is my place, and we're dancing with like Lilo and Stitch, and I'm looking and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's every like person from every background, every ability, and we're all dancing together, and like we don't care what we look like, we're like saying, doing, like how silly we look, like we're just happy, like we're accepted, we're here, like this is gorgeous. Like that, like to me, is the beauty of any Pride space, really. And it was nice for Disneyland to give that to us.
Beautiful, wonderful. That's so lovely. It sounds way better than what happened to me in Star Wars Night, so I'm so happy.
Oh no!
There's
you can listen to that episode if you want to hear
about it. But
all the drama about that.
I mean, there's certainly like misses in the marks that they make, and there's so much like merchandising and there's things you could dissect from it, but like having that space though, like it definitely means something to me. As I mean, I will relate. When I was younger and I went for gay days, like with a friend, we took a picture with Cinderella. And I was telling my friend last night, like, it's such a world of difference that like we have these characters now that are dressed up in rainbow and we're having fun and they're like joking and doing like very queer coded like things. Whereas when I was younger to unofficial gay days and I like went to take a picture with Cinderella, she literally cringed and did this. So difference.
That night and day difference. And you are talking about, and we've talked about this on the podcast when it comes to the Disneyland community. I don't know about Disney World. We have unofficial themed days that have started to slowly become more official. In this case, like actually taken on by the organization. Because I know like our friend Tanya goes on Bats Day for like all the emo, goth, and metal community. And sometimes the characters will wear like dark clothing, but that one isn't official yet. So as we start to have more voices, that kind of makes Disneyland want to do more things. Maybe for capitalism, but that's fine.
Yeah. Sometimes,
Yeah.
you gotta like exploit their capitalism, I guess. I don't know. It's a weird line.
It's a very weird line.
It's a weird line.
Yeah. But I'm glad you had a really great experience. And hopefully in the future that they make these after dark events more inclusive, and also just like reserving that space, that public space, I think is what I'm hearing was most important, and recognizing that public space for your community. I think that was my biggest takeaway from that. And hopefully they continue to do it in the future, because as we know, some after dark events have been canceled and they haven't been brought back. I hope you all get, how many days are they doing right now? Was it just one, or it's multiple, right?
I think we have 2, because I know they're doing it tomorrow too.
Great.
Okay, yeah, 18th and the 20th, yes. And something that's we've also talked about on the podcast is if you're doing any of the night events, the second day is usually a little different than the first day, because they've learned something like organization wise. And so sometimes that makes it a little bit easier to navigate. Sometimes it adds its own little barrier to it. So you can't even compare the same event.
I would love to get like
event.
Participants from every single different event, and then have like this roundtable discussion of what worked, what didn't work. Did you get to eat? Did you get to drink the thing you wanted to drink, or did you get to take a picture with that character? Because I want to know these stories. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, anything else, Ariel?
Yeah. Was the food actually good, or was it just slapped a rainbow on it?
A lot of it seems to be like slapped rainbow on it. We did not try really. I think there was a Rice Krispie that was kind of calling my name, and then I was like, it just looks pretty. I know what that Rice Krispie tastes like. I don't need it.
Yeah. Also, that much sugar after dark, it is a lot, and it's not like during the day when you're burning calories. It's you're consuming all of this, and then you're gonna like pass out on wherever you are at the end of the night.
There was I think instead of the gray stuff, they had the rainbow stuff
from Beauty and the Beast.
It's delicious.
Like, okay.
And thinking about Disney's role in advocacy and inclusion, what are both of y'all's thoughts on how Disney can continue to be a positive force for inclusion and representation within the LGBTQ plus community? Because I know there is a lot of work to do still, but keeping as we are trying to think of it in a positive light, because we know that there's work to be done, like I said. But what do you think? What do you think that you're doing right, and what can they expand on that, basically?
I mean, I think positive queer characters in main roles.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. And not putting them as sidekicks, or not just being a beeline story, because these stories deserve to be highlighted, right?
Yeah. And, not just doing the traditional, like, coming out or having a place of trauma, showing us in the light of succeeding and thriving. And that's not our entire identity. But, like highlighting and showing normalcy, basically.
Yeah. I do think, though, that an issue that Disney has been facing with their mainstream stuff is the fact that they're trying to be like, yes, gay people are normal, so we won't bring attention to it. They're gay,
right?
But, because it's normal, it's like, yeah, we'll have like 2 seconds of them with a little pride flag in the background. Which I feel like Disney hasn't earned the right to be there yet, low key. Like, we have to go through the like conversations about being queer before we can get to the point where it's normal. And Disney is kind of like a homophobic parent right now who's like, yay, I'm so glad that you came out to me. Let's hide it from the family, though.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Great point.
And
that's so accurate.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to the inclusion, did any of you see the Pixar short Out?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It came out in May 2020, so we were all pandemicked. And it features 2 prominent gay men, and one of them is just coming out to his parent for like the first time. and they kiss. And it's a Pixar short, so, you know, of course it's Pixar. When it comes to, like, I feel more diversity and inclusion, Pixar's doing it way more than Disney, although the news has come out that they might roll that back, which will be very sad. However, I was really happy to see it was an entire short, and he was scared, but there wasn't a traumatic experience. Like, I think one of the things that I hear from a lot of my queer friends is, like, can I have a gay character that doesn't get murdered after they've fallen in love? Like, that's what we see in mainstream. And, like, you know, I had a lot of them say if Disney puts more queer people in, they're gonna be a parent that gets murdered, because that's like Disney's MO. So it's like, is that in a line with Disney, or is it like just feeding this narrative of trauma within the community versus celebration? And so that short is the only one that I can think of where it's prominent. There's main characters. It's not assumed. They're not in the background. There's not a lot of conversation happening. I think, but we understand the essence of just like wanting to be in a relationship, feeling a little bit of butterflies, and then kind of sharing that experience with your parent, and it being okay. I think that was the other thing. There was no rejection. There was confusion from the parents of like, what exactly are you hiding from me? I thought it was a really beautiful short, but it's the only one that comes to my mind where I'm not imprinting. Otherwise, it's like Luca to me is like queer representation of not only potentially bi or pan people, but even queer romance, right? That isn't just monogamous or heteronormative in that sense.
Yeah, like Luca is so amazing because the creator of Luca was like, I didn't intend for this to be gay, but real. You know what I mean? Like, if that's how y'all see it, then that's how y'all see it, and I'm glad. But when I watched Luca, I don't remember the names of the characters, but the tall gay boy, or the tall, not gay boy, the taller gay boy, I was like, he's gay.
Yeah,
Alberto? Luca Alberto and
Julia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alberto, I thought Alberto was so queer. Just even by, I don't know, I think, like, I just saw so much of myself in Alberto. I've had experiences like that as a kid, you know what I mean? Like, having an identity that you have to keep hidden, and that you share with someone close to you, and you're like, OMG, we have the same identity. This is crazy. But then when it comes to expressing that in public, you know, there's fear of rejection, especially from, you know, a place of wanting to feel at home and being afraid that by losing, you know, that connection with these people that you've just met, you know, you'll never have community again. Which is what I could tell was going through Luca's mind when he was like, ew, get that sea monster away from me. So yeah, I don't know. It's such a good, like, encapsulation of, like, an early queer experience that it's crazy that it wasn't meant to be that way. But it's also amazing that, you know, like, identity is multifaceted and it's so intersectional that, like, you can exist within, like, different identities and still be able to see yourself through the same story. And yeah, banger movie. It was just so good. But yeah,
I love that.
I love Luca. Like, it immediately became one of my favorite, like, Disney movies. And yeah, there was no way. I mean, I know, like, all my friends at the time were just like, this movie has to be, like, gay. Like, there's just no way that it's not. But I also think it's, like, kind of beautiful that it's not explicitly, because it's maybe a way that we can be like, hey, look at this story, look at this experience, so that you can have some understanding.
I think that's really interesting that you note that, because I have heard people say that the ace community has hoped that Elsa is ace because it doesn't seem like she has a desire for romance or a desire for sexual attraction. And then I've seen the lesbian community hope that she gets a woman partner or a same-sex partner because she could be lesbian. And if we pick a route, then that kind of excludes somebody else. But if we don't pick a route, everyone can project on, but then we didn't pick a route, which makes it look like excluding everybody.
But she could also be lesbian and
Mhm.
asexual. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like, these identities are intersectional. They're not like
Yeah.
one or the other. And
Mm.
I don't know, like, I think real. I think real. I think also in a way, which I don't know, maybe you should edit this out. But I think in a way, a lot of Disney characters are asexual just because it's not really possible for them to express themselves
Mm.
on film
Mhm.
outside of just
Mhm.
romantically.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so, but then again, like, that's not really proper representation for anyone who is asexual because there's nuance in that.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I see one of the characters that we were talking about kind of being like attributed as a queer coded character was Merida from
Mhm.
Brave.
Mhm.
And we were
Oh.
sort of like thinking about it, and essentially the entire kind of reason that she's queer coded is that, oh, she's this strong woman who like doesn't have a romantic character or lead that
Mhm.
goes. And
Mhm.
I'm like, wait a minute, is that really a reason for her to be like attributed as a lesbian? It's simply like, it seems
Yeah.
a little
A little
suspect.
sus. Yeah. I've heard that
Yes.
about Moana too, just because she is just so
Mhm.
hyper focused on, just saving her village and nothing else to her matters. But I felt the same way.
Mhm.
I'm like, are we really looking at her multifacetedness, or are we just attributing it to the way that she's approaching her situation? I really love that, Shalom, you
Mhm.
were saying
Mhm.
that people are so multifaceted, and when we're looking at them in a story, so many people want to see them as just like one or the other. Whereas when you're looking at them as a human
Mm.
being,
Mhm.
you know
Mhm.
that they exist in different ways at different times all the time, because it's dynamic.
Mm.
Our existence is dynamic, and not to get super existential about
Mhm.
it,
Mhm.
but it's very hard to encapsulate that in a film. But at the same time, I think with stories like
Yes.
Luca, because the story itself was so rich and the message was
Mhm.
told very clearly without explicit instruction,
Mhm.
that's the power of storytelling. And I think if we do more of that kind of storytelling, it isn't a debate anymore. It's just, how were you impacted by the
Mhm.
story and what made you feel the way you felt,
Yeah.
you know?
And I think also, even with characters that are like in heteronormative relationships, you know, characters can still be headcanon as
Mhm.
different things. Like,
Mhm.
I know for the transmasculine community, Spider-Man is a big, there's a lot of headcanons that Peter Parker is transmasc. You know
Mm.
what I mean?
Mhm.
Just because of his experience with like being bit, or, the effects of an external force and changing your body and, extenuating ways, and
Mhm.
then you being seen as more masculine,
Mhm.
and being,
Right.
I don't know, just perceived as so many different things than you were before. A lot of people have compared Peter Parker's experience before getting bit to gender dysphoria. You know what
Mm.
I mean?
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah, like, even characters who have been written as straight men who have relationships with women only and
Mhm.
things like that, there's still room for queerness. And yeah, because these things, like,
Yeah.
they're fluid.
Yes.
There's no like rigid wall or barrier for the way that these things can be.
No, it makes me think of uh, one of the things that's sort of mentioned in the book, is that you have all the time in the world to keep discovering yourself. Like, this one moment, maybe like who you are in this moment, that doesn't mean like your future self is that. And when we're talking about essentially trying to find representation when it was very limited, um, in challenging heteronormativity, two people of opposite sex may not be straight. They could both be bi people. One of them could be pan. One of them could be ace. I think that is part of looking at intersectionality, is if we just automatically assume that they're both straight people, where's that assumption coming from? And why is that being normalized in our head about who these individuals are? Because nobody's going on film going, I am a straight man.
Right.
Right? That is just not happening. So we could say any one of these characters in straight presenting relationships may still be in a very queer relationship.
And you can have queer encounters and still identify as straight. You know what I mean? Like, these labels are self-imposed. You know, they're not like, while there are communal definitions for these things, you know, they're self-imposed labels, and you define your identity for yourself. No one else defines it for you. You know what I mean? Not to say that, like, whatever, like, conversion therapy is real or anything. But, you know, you can identify as straight and have dated men in the past and just realize, like, that's just not my thing. Or you can love dating men and still identify as straight. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. They're self-imposed labels. It's just like, yeah.
No, you're making me thinking of like Shang in a Mulan, right? Because he really enjoyed Ping. He really loved Mulan. Like, if we said that he has to say whether he is straight or bi or gay, that doesn't show the fact that he was just attracted to this person who he loved all their being.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, like, one of the things people don't think about in reality with, like, queer labels or being queer is, in the same way that you grow and understand yourself throughout life, you know, like, how many times, you know, throughout life do you go, like, oh, you know, just discovering something about yourself, right? It's the same, you know, I think it was 5 years ago, maybe a little bit more, that I discovered that I was demisexual. And I had no idea, like, what that meant or, you know, anything about it until a friend had mentioned it to me. And it literally set off light bulbs, like, oh my gosh, like, how this affected my youth, how this affected everything. So there's so much that you can grow and change and understand about yourself that can affect what your label or, you know, how you identify. That, like, why aren't we allowed to change how we describe ourselves, you know?
Yeah.
Would you be willing to educate our audience in case they have never heard of the term demisexual?
Basically, I don't want to give a strict definition for everyone, because there's obviously I would say an arc of how people identify as demi when you come to demi, because it's semi, you know, but in general, it means you have to have a romantic or, like, a personal connection in order to have any sort of intimate activity.
To know. I think, you know, on that note, let's kind of move and pivot a little bit into your personal journeys. Jodie, this was a great way to kind of foray into that, because we know your bio mentions that you found your true self through diverse stories and travels. How these experiences, if there's one that kind of comes to your mind first, shape your writing and advocacy work? And on that note, what advice would you give to young LGBTQ plus individuals who are struggling with that self-acceptance?
So, as far as discovering myself, I grew up in a, like, conservative suburb of Los Angeles, and I went to a high school that, as far as I knew, there were only 2 other openly gay people there. So I felt very, like, misunderstood in a lot of ways. I didn't even really have a relationship with those people. Like, I kind of knew who they were, but I never got to sit down and have a conversation with someone else who was queer, like, probably mid-20s, maybe. So when I started traveling, not so much that I met people within my community, but that I could see what it was like in different communities, that I could see people who were different within their communities or different from my own community. It just really opened up, juxtaposed with books, by the way, like, you know, seeing that same thing in books, that it was okay to be different. Like, it was okay and beautiful to be different, really. Like, you know, when I would travel somewhere, I would see these different, like, cultures or traditions or, you know, you name it, and just think they were really cool. And if that was cool, that if something else was different, like, it was okay to be different. And
what was your favorite place that you visited?
Oh my gosh.
Top 3, maybe, if you can't narrow it down to one.
Place. Like, like ever in my life.
Yeah, I mean, what's coming
to mind now? You can always change your mind.
And this is not definitive.
Oh,
no pressure.
I mean, I love traveling so much. I really loved going to Turkey. It was so different and so beautiful, and like, it was one of the first places that I like fell in love with the food. Like, because I'm always like scared because I'm allergic to a bunch of different things, but for some reason everything was just great there. But like everybody was really nice there, and I don't know, everything, like just the culture, and yeah. I also really loved Scotland. Gorgeous, really kind people, really intriguing, like how they sort of mix like old world culture and things. And probably Japan. I really just loved, or maybe China. I don't know. I've been to 30 countries, guys.
Love that.
Over
Jodie,
30.
Snaps to that,
so like seeing the Great Wall was like one of the most incredible experiences, and seeing how people in China like lived, that was like different than how we lived, and getting to witness those customs. And again, like there's so many ancient buildings, and this juxtaposition of like an ancient culture with the modern culture, and I don't know, guys. I can't.
No, those are.
My answer is going to be different tomorrow.
That's okay. That's okay.
As far as advice that I would give, I would say, honestly, really getting to know yourself. Like, if you can explore yourself like outside the noise, and basically explore the ways that you know, you are you, journal, go to support groups if you have to, or find like good supportive friends, and just really like find out who you are. Like, I think that would be my first like piece of advice. And then like affirmations and affirming that, like basically then, making sure that you know that that's valuable, that that's something that's unique and beautiful and a gift, and that you have a completely different way of viewing the world, and a completely beautiful way of viewing the world and contributing to the world, and like finding everything around that to affirm yourself every day, because we all have moments of doubt. We all have moments of like questioning our perfection and things like that, that like you just have to like build this bubble of affirming yourself around yourself.
Yeah, because in your book you have rainbow affirmations after each section that are specifically designed for queer teens to be able to celebrate themselves, and are specifically targeted to affirming that part of your identity, as well as how it intersects with your other identities. And the interesting thing about affirmations is like we tend to see them as very surface level. And so when you read them in the book, they're so impactful, they're so intimate and internal. It really challenges this idea that you're just talking noise, or like faking it till you make it. It's a really deep inside look, and it aligns with this belief that you're sharing, where it's like, get to know yourself. It is okay to get to know yourself. It is okay to explore more of you.
If you have an affirmation, for instance, that you read that says, I'm trying to think of like something very, I mean, even if it's just like, I
live, laugh, love.
Yeah. If it's something like, I am sparkly, right? And you're not a sparkly person, or that's not like a real strong affirmation, but it's not going to resonate with you, right? So like that's part of why we did like the sections and how we did the book, and having voices from teens that you can look at and see, I identify with that, or I relate to that, because then you can look at the affirmations that really speak to you, because you have to believe at least a small part of that affirmation, to make it really work, to really get into your brain and be like, okay, this is going to have power with me.
Yes. Research has shown that we as humans innately feel discomforted by lying to ourselves, and we have a negative bias. So we tend to, which is weird because usually the negativity is a lie to ourselves. So it's like these two opposing forces. And so when we speak an affirmation, it's a lot easier to connect to it if we're projecting to a future self, if we don't feel it right now, or if we add a buffer to it that makes it feel right now. And the wonderful thing about the affirmations in the books is there's a variety of them. So you can choose, and you've given the readers permission to adapt them. They don't have to just stick to the language that was given. And I find in therapy sessions, when we're trying to create affirmations, it really needs to be individualistic and has to be felt somewhere that this could be right or may be right, versus it being spoken into right now if I don't feel it, because I will reject that with all of my soul.
Right. And whenever in the classroom you do an about me, if you say, how do you feel right now? More than likely the kids are going to be like, I'm tired, I'm sleepy, I'm hungry. But if you say, you know, how do you want to feel in a week? Or how do you want to feel when you're in the next grade level? So it's like, oh, I want to feel smarter, or I want to feel more stronger, or I want to get better at kickball or something. So, you know, I mean, it is all true whenever you're thinking of yourself in that present moment. It usually is pretty negative. But if you are thinking about yourself in the future, more than likely it'll be a positive outcome.
Mm-hmm.
I love
Yeah.
that.
And one day those timelines will intersect.
Yeah.
As we've seen from Loki, who I hear is also a queer icon. Right. So there you go.
Yes.
Oh, God, yes. One of my favorites.
Shalom, let's move on to you. Tell us how you became connected with Jodie. I know that as we have been talking, I don't know if it's obvious to our readers, but Shalom is quite younger than most of us here on the podcast. So they have a very special introspect in, you know, everything. And Shalom, I just want to say, as I'm hearing you talk, I have so much hope for her future because you are so insightful. Yes. And so, you know, just the way that you're articulating things, kudos to you, because I just saw a lot of my middle schoolers in 8th grade graduate on, and I've known these kids since they were like in 2nd, 1st grade, and I'm like, are you gonna be okay? I think you're gonna be okay, but I don't know if you're gonna be okay. But you know, I have loved your input so far, so thank you. But anyway, going back to the subject matter, how did you and Jodie get connected?
Well, my mom is also an author, and they're both good friends. And my mom has been like super cool with me being queer, and she's always like known. I'm the type of person I kind of just do things. So I'll be like, Mom, I'm joining a coalition. She's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, Mom, I'm at a protest right now. She's like, oh, okay, cool. And that's just kind of how I am. But because my mom knew that Jodie and Eric were writing Queer Cheer, she was like, hey, maybe it would be good to connect you guys because like I've done a lot of work just within the queer community as a queer person. A lot of my understanding of like my identity has come from like researching queer theory, reading Judith Butler and Audre Lorde, and you know, learning about queer history and just getting involved in those communities. And my mom thought it would be a great opportunity, and it really I loved meeting Jodie for the first time and having conversations about my experience as a queer person. And yeah, I'm just so grateful for this opportunity. So thank you again, Jodie.
I've read some of your stories so far. So the way that the book is sort of designed, there's snippets from different teens of a variety of ages talking about their experience. I haven't finished the book. I'm still reading it. I have used some sections with my clients already. And when I mentioned that you'd be on the podcast, they are very excited to hear you. So you have some hidden fans.
Yeah, it's so, I mean, when we set out to find all of our teens, we basically, you know, we went through some of the people that we knew and then some of the like calling out between social media, between, you know, our community. And we had like this goal to find everyone from, you know, as many different identities, as many different like cultures, like just trying to get as wide of a net as we could so that we could include as many voices as we could. And I mean, Stephanie, to what you were saying, like every one of my conversations with these teens was like, I was crying by the end. Like it was just, they're all like so much hope for the future and so insightful and incredible. And I mean, we were blown away.
Yeah.
They're so smart. They're so compassionate. So like beautiful, beautiful people. Like it was incredible being like, that's my favorite part of all of this is having met them.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't remember being that wise sounding when I was that age. I think I was still trying to figure out how to pair like a pair of jeans with like a top that would be appropriate for some kind of interview at like Jamba Juice or something. Like that's where my mind was. Like not, you know, this all encompassing, you know, how do we look at ourselves? How do we, you know, give ourselves love? How do we project that with the circles that we have? How do we create change in the world using the power that we have? I think, you know, because the world has changed in the last 20 years, or maybe even the last 15 to 20 years. The resources are endless. And I think it takes a certain amount of smartness is not a word. It takes a certain amount of intelligence to navigate all of that with your devices, with, you know, what you can access, the people you can access, and, you know, just juggling all of that. You know, you guys really have the skills that we couldn't even have imagined if we had that at our fingertips at our age.
Well, thank you. That it really does mean a lot. And yeah, I do think a large part of just the things that I know and the things that I'm passionate about is just having access to like history. You know what I mean? Especially queer media. I talk about this in the book. I do. But one of my favorite movies is this movie called Punk, which came out in I think like 2001, and it's one of the only like queer black blockbuster films. It's like a B-list movie, but it's one of my favorite movies ever because it shows queer blackness in a way that I had never seen before on film. And other movies like The Watermelon Woman by Cheryl Dunye, amazing movie, but it also is one of the first times I ever saw like a black lesbian at the center of a movie. And the movie is about her experience as a black lesbian and the experiences of other black lesbians. And like, I don't know, going back to like the topic of Disney and autobiographical stories, you know, sometimes we need a movie just about being gay. You know what I mean? I'd love a Disney movie just about being gay because like my life, like I am a person, you know, I do exist as, you know, someone who, I don't know, I love making music. I'm trying to write like a screenplay right now. Like I love doing things like that, but I'm also gay. You know what I mean? And being gay impacts every facet of my life and will for the rest of my time being alive. You know what I mean? And so does being black. And so does being a man. And like, you know, you can't really separate those specific parts of my identity from my view of the world because I've been that way since the beginning. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to the organizations in SFB, Filipino youth organizations like PYK, doing a lot of great work right now. Anakbayan SFB, they just started. They're doing some great work. Like, yeah, you know, those communities also taught me a lot about myself and the importance of solidarity and allyship.
Yes.
And like going back to multifaceted identities, but like how important solidarity and allyship are when it comes to interacting with people who are multifaceted. So yeah, thank you, Filipinos.
Well, and speaking of like allyship and being an advocate, how would you describe being an ally and advocate for the queer community? Like, what would you need to see from us to know that this is a safe space, that this is an intentional safe space?
Well, I recently Margaret Cho, she's
Comedian, yep.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you guys know Margaret Cho. Yeah, she recently came to my school, and I had the opportunity to speak with her briefly. Um, and
Yeah, she's
yeah,
an
I love
icon.
Margaret Cho. I have seen Fire Island. Yeah, I've seen Fire Island 7 times.
I
That's one of
love
my
that
favorite movies.
you think of Fire
Um,
Island, whereas for me, she had a show on like ABC where it was like a family comedy of all Asians, and I was just like, oh my gosh, just a bunch of
Yes,
Asians on
yes.
TV, like that's crazy to me. But yes, she played a pivotal role in Fire Island as well.
Yeah. But we talked about, just like when you see upcoming artists and storytellers within the queer community, make sure that you give them attention, make sure that you spotlight them, even if they're not like the biggest thing. You know what I mean? Like Chapel Roan, like Chapel Roan, I think that's how you say her name. But um, she's upcoming queer artist, amazing music. She's so cool. Chapel Roan, if you see this shout out, you know, hey, I'd love to produce something for you if you're interested. You know what I mean? Um, but yeah, no, she's great. I love her. And spotlighting queer artists, queer storytellers is so important, especially if they're indie, especially if they're, just starting out, because we all deserve the chance to and the opportunity to share our voices. And I think that is the best way to be an ally. It's just try to uplift as many voices as you can, just like Jodie is doing her book. So yeah.
To be honest, I think the first thing is to listen. Like just having people that are willing to hear, to listen to, instead of trying to step forth and do like can I sit down with the Disney CEO and like be like, okay, let me explain what this means, having like there's corporations, for instance, that during Pride they slap a rainbow on something and they sell it, and then there's corporations that like they hire queer artists and they put out, what is ours, and they, I mean, pretty much what Shalom said, amplify our voices, like they instead of trying to speak for us, they listen and they put us out there, essentially, so that people can hear our stories, so they can understand and get a little little bit of comprehension, and maybe also erase some of that fear. Like find those stories, maybe like Luca, where we can find some intersection of relatability.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is,
Beautiful,
not
beautiful.
just listening, but actively listening. Like listening with a purpose, because if you're just listening and you're hearing it, it goes in and the actions don't match that, that's not actually listening. Like just kind of like how we have multiple cultural representations that are wanting to be more seen in Disney platforms. The same thing with queer stories. If you're going to tell a queer stories, have a queer person tell those stories. Have a queer person write those stories. Have a queer person put pen to the animation on these stories, because all of those things will shine through. And looping back to what we were talking about earlier, there's so many things that are more powerful when unsaid and just shown, because people will feel that when they're watching a Disney movie. And I think we can all agree that at any point in our time when we watch a Disney movie and we felt very strongly about something, that's when the storytelling is at its best, because we feel it. We're not being told.
Yeah, I think that's like that embodiment of the phrase, not about us without us, and more than one in the room, right? We don't want someone to be the token representation of a community. So you need more than one in the room, and you don't want to tell a story that isn't your story. Because when you are viewing a story from an outside perspective, unfortunately, you're going to project stereotype, you're going to get nuance wrong, you're going to miss so many things. There's going to be so many ways in which the depth is lost. And so that's why you have to have someone in the room, but it can't be that one someone. It has to be more of them and the person who's leading and helming the project. We've talked about this before on the podcast, but it can't just be the people on the camera, the people working behind the scenes, the people animating, the people who are on set, the costume designers. All of these individuals are pivotal in storytelling. And when you don't have them in those multiple spaces, what we have is a very flat, unwell received project that's going to be more harmful than helpful.
And that's why Mulan, the live action movie, was not good. I'm sorry to say it, but that's why it was bad. There weren't enough Asian people behind the scenes writing the story. And you know, it didn't do well.
This is true.
Yeah.
It had the facade of being something that like you would see in Chinese cinema, but when you watched it, the highlights were all in the preview. And I'm like, what happened?
Yeah. Yes. That's like when we haven't talked about it on the podcast because it was very disappointing, but Raya the Last Dragon is about 18 different countries. You're going to have that many diverse communities shoved into one movie. You're not going to have the right representation. Like, and it was sad. It was sad to be like, this could have been a Filipino character, but also not.
All that to say, Jodie, can you tell us where to find your book? So for our listeners who are wanting to read it, I know we've talked a lot about it, probably piqued a lot of folks' interest in it. Where can we find it?
Yeah, sure. So you can find it anywhere. Any major book retailer, such as Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local indie bookstore, hopefully your library. We have a request. If you don't find it at your library, please request it, because one of the things that's really important to us is that anyone who cannot afford this book, that they have the opportunity, the chance to get it any way that they can. But if you're looking for a quick, easy reference, www.queercheerbook.com. There's lots of easy, quick buy links and reviews and all kinds of cool resources as well for any teens that are looking, or parents of teens or guardians of teens that are looking for resources in just about anything in queer life.
Awesome. And Shalom?
Yeah, so I have a SoundCloud. I go by Boy Venus on SoundCloud. I make electronic music. Any of you listeners, if you are looking to make any indie video games or any film projects, I would love to score for you. I love doing game scoring as well as film scoring. And also I'm looking to finish a screenplay that I'm writing this summer about 3 kids with superpowers from space. And they're in an indie band together. It's very Scott Pilgrim meets Steven Universe-esque. So yeah, again, Boy Venus on SoundCloud. I'm gonna put my email on there in case any of you want to hit me up. But yeah, that's me.
All right.
Okay, well, if you want to DM us and let us know what you will be doing for this Pride, go ahead at happiestpodgt. You can find us both on IG and X. We want to thank our guests for joining us today. This was a wonderful conversation. Please support queer artists and queer work, and let Disney know that you want more representation of the queer community.
Thank you for having us.
See y'all next time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.